2,000 years ago, Rome housed over 1 million people. While most cities across the globe struggled to support 20,000, this capital built roads spanning 3 continents, standardized civil law, and pioneered high-rise apartment blocks with running water. The engineering required to maintain the society stood alone for centuries. The Pantheon, completed around 125 AD, still holds the record for the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, standing for 19 centuries without major structural changes. But the city was almost destroyed in its infancy. Before the marble and aqueducts, Rome was a collection of muddy villages on a defensible group of hills above a bend in the Tiber River. According to their own founding myth, twin brothers Romulus and Remus were abandoned as babies and raised by a wolf. Growing up and returning to build a city, they argued over which hill to claim. Romulus killed his brother. Rome's very first act was an assassination inside the founding family. That undercurrent of violence persisted through Rome's early monarchy. After decades of cruelty and corruption from a line of kings, the assault of a noblewoman named Lucretia by the king's son pushed the Roman nobility to their breaking point. In 509 BC, they rose up, threw out the royal family, and vowed to never be ruled by a king again. The Republic was born. Surrounded by larger, wealthier, and more established neighbors like the Etruscans, this fragile hilltop settlement learned early on that stability required a relentless, aggressive instinct to survive. The new republic designed a system where power was shared between 2 elected consuls and an advisory senate, but the rules were rigged. The old, wealthy patrician families held all the priesthoods, the laws, and the top jobs. The plebeians, farmers, craftsmen, and traders who fought in the army and built the city, had almost no say. By 494 BC, the plebeians were done putting up with it. They simply walked out. In an early general strike, ordinary Romans camped on a nearby hill and refused to work or fight. Since Rome couldn't defend itself without soldiers, the patricians were forced to the negotiating table. The result was the tribune of the plebs. This new elected position existed solely to protect ordinary citizens from being mistreated by the elite. Crucially, a tribune was legally untouchable. They could not be arrested, harmed, or removed while in office. Over the next 2 centuries, the classes clashed repeatedly over power. Yet, instead of tearing the city apart through warfare, they channeled their conflict through protests, strikes, and legal reforms. Rome grew stronger because it built institutions that could absorb and resolve internal friction. As Rome systematically absorbed the Italian peninsula, its ambitions pushed outward across the Mediterranean. This expansion put them on a direct collision course with Carthage, a wealthy North African power that controlled the western sea routes. The resulting Punic Wars pushed Rome to the brink of extinction. In 218 BC, the Carthaginian general Hannibal marched his army and dozens of war elephants over the Alps in winter. He decimated Roman forces, eventually slaughtering up to 70,000 Romans in a single afternoon at the Battle of Cannae. The shock was total, but the Senate refused to even discuss peace. They raised new armies, armed freed slaves, and launched a counter-invasion directly at North Africa. Rome ultimately won, burning Carthage to the ground and enslaving its population. With its greatest rival gone, Rome was left with immense wealth. The spoils of war were funneled straight to the aristocrats. They bought up vast tracts of land and worked them using cheap slave labor brought back from the conquests. Small farmers, returning from years of fighting, found their livelihoods gone and flooded into the city looking for work. 2 brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, tried to address this crisis. Serving as tribunes of the plebs, they proposed redistributing public land back to the poor. The Senate responded by beating Tiberius to death with chairs, and a decade later, killing Gaius as well. The office designed specifically to protect the people, supposedly untouchable by law, was violently erased by the people it was meant to check. The institutions that had kept the Republic stable for centuries fractured under the weight of this new inequality. When political opponents stood in the way, murder became the accepted solution. Into this volatile environment walked Gaius Julius Caesar. A brilliant tactician, he spent 8 years systematically conquering Gaul, what is now France and Belgium. By killing or enslaving roughly 1 million people, he built a massive personal fortune and an army fiercely loyal to him rather than to the Roman state. Watching his power grow, the Senate ordered Caesar to disband his army and return as a private citizen. Instead, in January 49 BC, he marched a legion across the Rubicon River. Generals were legally forbidden to cross this boundary with troops. By making the crossing, Caesar prioritized his own ambition and plunged Rome into a bitter civil war. Caesar emerged victorious and was declared dictator for life. But on March 15, 44 BC, a group of senators, desperately hoping to restore the old system, stabbed him 23 times. They thought they had saved the Republic. Instead, they had delivered its final blow. The assassination triggered another devastating war, leaving Caesar's teenage heir, Octavian, as the sole survivor. Understanding that Romans still despised the word king, Octavian made a calculated move. He called himself first citizen and claimed he was simply restoring the Republic, all while consolidating absolute military and political control. The Senate granted him the title Augustus. His reign began the Pax Romana, a 2-century era of intense economic growth and urban expansion. After 100 years of civil wars, the population accepted the trade. They gave up their political institutions for the iron-fisted stability of a single ruler. This autocratic system peaked during the 2nd century AD under a string of leaders known as the 5 Good Emperors. Instead of passing power to their biological children, each ruler adopted a highly qualified successor. This meritocracy created what many historians consider the most prosperous period in the ancient world. The empire expanded to cover roughly 5 million square kilometers. To mark these victories, Emperor Trajan erected a 30-meter marble pillar in Rome. Carved with a continuous spiral of images, it served as a permanent towering record of the military campaigns that pushed Roman territory to its absolute limits. But the empire had grown too massive to easily defend. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, recognized the strain and shifted strategy from endless conquest to fortification. At the outer edges of the territory, like the northern frontier of Britain, he commissioned permanent stone walls to separate Roman land from the tribes beyond. The meritocracy finally broke with Marcus Aurelius. The last of the 5 good emperors, he made a fateful decision to name his erratic, deeply unstable biological son, Commodus, as his successor. Commodus's assassination in 192 AD shattered the long peace. What followed was the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next 50 years, Rome tore through more than 20 different emperors, nearly all military commanders killed by their own troops. Trade routes collapsed, a plague ravaged the population, and the empire literally began breaking apart into rival factions. The sheer geographic scale that had made Rome the wealthiest power on earth became its greatest vulnerability. Without a highly competent administrator at the center, a territory stretching from Scotland to Syria was mathematically impossible to govern. In 284 AD, Emperor Diocletian seized power and kept the state alive through sheer force of organization. His most radical solution was an honest admission of the empire's unmanageable size. He drew a line down the Mediterranean, splitting the massive territory into an eastern and a western half, each with its own ruler. Decades later, Constantine consolidated power, legalized Christianity, and made a decision that forever altered the map. He built a new capital in the east, naming it Constantinople. The economic and political center of gravity shifted definitively eastward, leaving the less populated, heavily stretched Western Empire to fend for itself. That vulnerability was tested by the arrival of the Huns. These fierce nomadic warriors swept out of the Central Asian steppes, creating a wave of displacement. Entire Germanic populations were pushed westward, pressing relentlessly against the long, fragile borders of the Western Roman Empire. The defenses finally buckled. In 410 AD, the Visigoth king Alaric led his forces directly into Rome, looting the city for 3 days. For a capital that had not been successfully attacked by a foreign enemy in 800 years, the psychological blow was staggering. But the actual end was agonizingly quiet. On September 4, 476 AD, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer deposed the final Western Roman emperor, a teenager named Romulus Augustulus. There was no grand battle. Odoacer simply took the crown, packed up the imperial robes, and shipped them east to Constantinople. the Western Empire dissolved, slowly suffocating under the weight of its own unparalleled ambition. Yet its ruins became the foundation for the modern world. From the legal frameworks that govern us to the concrete arches that support our cities, the systems Rome forged in its long, violent struggle for survival are still holding up the structures of today.